Good morning, everyone. This is Sunil here. Let's get started with today's session. Can everyone hear me? And let me share my screen. I hope everyone can hear me. And I have shared my screen. So if you guys can see my screen, let me know. If you can't, let me know. Otherwise, I will assume that you guys can see my screen and I'll continue. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Okay, let's get started with today's session. Today we will start with data provisioning. Of course, we started the data provisioning last week also, data provisioning, but we started with a flat file approach, right? How to load data from flat file. I showed you that. Today we will start what is called trigger-based approach, or in common terminologies, or which is also famous as SLT. Everyone will have heard this name, SLT, right? Everyone who is trying to learn about SAP HANA, they will have heard this terminology SLT. So you might be wondering what is SLT. So right now I'm going to explain what SLT is. Okay, SLT stands for SAP Landscape Transforms. SAP Landscape Transforms. So this is a trigger-based approach of data provisioning. Okay, so trigger-based approach for data provisioning. So we have to understand why it is called trigger-based approach. What is the trigger that they're talking about here? Okay, so in order to understand all those things, first of all, we have to understand how SLT can be used. Okay, how SLT can be used. So let us say we have our ECC system, SAP ECC system, okay, on any traditional database, any database. Okay, ECC system is sitting on a database in our organization. All right, I have another system, another third-party application. Let's say a portal. Simple example is a portal, which is talking to a legacy database, SQL database, for example. Okay, these are two separate systems that are active, that are handling some transactions today in today's world. All right, so now we have started implementing BW, okay, and on HANA database. It need not be BW, any system sitting on HANA database. Right, any system sitting on HANA database. So now if you want to load the data, if you want to bring the data from ECC into BW, there are two ways. One is direct extractor method. Bring the data into BW using direct extractors, right? We have our SAP standard content extractors, or we can create our own extractors and we can bring the data in. But this cannot be real time. This cannot be brought, the data cannot be brought using these extractors in real time into BW. Right? For that purpose, SAP has provided what is called SLT, SAP Landscape Transforms. So using SLT, data can be loaded from a non-HANA database into a HANA database. Okay, SLT is a data provisioning technique using which data can be loaded from any source to any database to HANA database. Okay, can be done this way also. You can load data from any third-party database or legacy database into HANA database also. So this approach of loading data from a system into HANA database, for which HANA is not the primary database. Okay, see here in this example, SAP BW system, HANA is the primary database. Correct? For ECC system, let's call it Oracle. Okay, Oracle database. Oracle database is the primary database. Whereas for this particular portal, SQL is the primary database. Correct? So now for these two systems, HANA is not the primary database. Okay, so HANA is the primary database for BW system. So loading data from any system into HANA database where HANA is not the primary database to that system is called SLT. Okay, you are loading data from a system into HANA where HANA is not the primary database. Why do I say this? If HANA is the primary database, if you load any data into this application, it will sit in the HANA database. Correct? If I load the data through SAP extractors into info object or info cube or DSO, whatever it could be, the data directly sits in the HANA database because HANA is the primary database. But here, if I create a sales order in ECC system, it sits in the Oracle system but not in the HANA system. It sits in the Oracle database but not in the HANA database because Oracle is the primary database for ECC system. Correct? So, loading data into HANA database from any system, okay, any database for which, from any application for which it is not the primary database. That is called SLT. Okay. Now let us get a few more general concepts about SLT. Okay. And then we'll go in detail. Okay. So SLT is the only trigger-based approach. Okay. SLT can be used, or I'll write SLT here. Okay. Number one, it can be used for both SAP as well as non-SAP sources. Okay, that's what I show you here. Initially, when SAP released SLT, we could load data only from SAP sources or sources into HANA database. But now SAP has opened it up so that you can load from pretty much every database into HANA database. Provision the data from pretty much any database into HANA database. It would be SAP application or non-SAP application. Okay, that's one point. Second point is SLT can be used to replicate or provision the data in real time. In real time, meaning a transaction gets created in ECC, SLT brings that into HANA immediately. Okay, SLT brings that data into HANA immediately. That is why it is called real-time data provisioning methodology. Okay, is there any other method that can be used for real-time data provisioning? Yes, ETL approach, which we'll cover in the next classes, BODS, in the future classes. That also can do it, but this is the best suited, SLT or trigger-based approach is the best suited for real-time data replication into HANA database. All right. So now we will see how does this work and why this is called a trigger-based approach. Trigger-based approach. Okay. In order to know that, we have to learn different components of SLT. Okay, different components of SLT. There has to be there is a component called LTR. Okay, which stands for LT Replication Server. LT Replication Server, LTR. Okay, so LT, what is LTR? It's a application component. It's a server for used for implementing SLT, for installing SLT. Just like for installation of HANA database, we need a OS and we need a hardware, right? All those things. Just like that, it is an application component or it's a software that needs to be installed at some place in order to implement SLT. All right. So where should this be installed? Can it be installed anywhere? Can it be installed on my laptop? No. It cannot be installed anywhere. There are some specifications as to where this has to be installed. Okay. So this has to be installed on a SAP system. This can be installed, this LTR, which is necessary, mandatory for SLT to be implemented. has to be installed on a SAP system. Okay, installed on a SAP system. Can it be installed on any SAP system? Meaning I can have SAP ECC, SAP BW, I can have SCM or CRM system, right? BPC system, whatever it could be. So can it be installed on any SAP system? It can be. There are some more limitations. Okay, it can be installed on any system where the SAP system has ABAP NetWeaver stack 7.02. Okay, it's a stack level. This is the minimum requirement. This is a minimum requirement. SAP system with ABAP NetWeaver stack 7.02. All right. Otherwise, you can say that I have a SAP system, but it is not on that ABAP stack. So what should I do? Can I not implement SLT? You can. You have to install something called DMIS add-on. Okay, DMIS add-on. So these are some of the hardware requirements for installing LTR. Okay, LTR is the LT replication server, which is the engine or which is the heart of SLT. Okay, now let us assume that we have installed LTR. Now we have installed LTR on one of the systems. So why it is called a trigger-based approach? What are the components? Right? There are two scenarios. There are two scenarios which I have to explain. First, I will explain SAP source systems. Okay, SAP source systems. We have an SAP source system, let's say ECC system, right? And we have HANA database here. We have installed HANA database, and we have installed LTR, which is necessary for SLT to be implemented. Where it is installed LTR, that is immaterial for us. Basis team will take care of it, and we will assume that it is installed on some of the SAP system which meets the criteria. Okay. So now in ECC system we have a table called KNA1. I want to bring the data from KNA1 into HANA database in real time using SLT. Okay, so there is something called read module. Okay, a component of application server is read module. Okay, this component is responsible for reading the data from the tables, any new data or change data. Does it read directly from the KNA1 table? No, it does not. In between, there is something called logging table. Logging table, okay? Logging table. So this read module reads the data from the logging table. Reads the data from the logging table. So now you can ask me, how does data get into the logging table? Right? How does data get into the logging table? The data gets into a logging table due to something called a trigger. Okay, a trigger. A trigger gets set. A trigger is set as soon as you enable that data, the database table for replication using SLT. A trigger gets set for that particular table. Okay, and SLT, using SLT can do only selective replication. You cannot replicate all the tables. Okay, you have to do selective replication only. Meaning, I need this particular table, I will bring it into HANA database. I need another table, I'll bring it into HANA database. SAP system has hundreds of thousands of database tables. I cannot bring everything using SLT. Okay, it has to be selective. Okay, so KNA1, as soon as I select this table for replication, I will create, its system will create a trigger and a logging table. Read module is introduced. Okay, and then there is a control module which sits in replication server. Control module, right? And then there is a write module. these are the components of SAP landscape transform. So read module reads the data from the logging table. As soon as there is a new record or a changed record in this particular table, this trigger gets activated, and because of this trigger, the data is written to the logging table. This trigger takes care of monitoring the changes in data in this particular table. Okay, it is returned to the logging table, and read module reads the data from the logging table and passes this particular data to the control module. Through what connection? Through a connection called RFC connection. Okay, since RFC connection, since the SAP source system and LTR is installed on SAP system, right? The two SAP systems communicate using RFC methodology. That is why an RFC connection is established, and read module passes the data to the control module through RFC connection. Okay, what does control module do? Control module maintains the structure between the source and the destination, meaning the source table may have 100 fields, but in target I want only 50 fields. So I would have maintained that mapping. Once you go into the system, it will be clear for you. I have to maintain which 50 fields that I want to bring it into the HANA database, right? That mapping of 100 source to 50 target fields. Okay, that mapping is controlled by controller module. Okay, and also it is responsible for maintaining consistency in the data transfer, meaning while the data has been read from the logging table using the read module, and it is being passed to the control module. What if the connection goes wrong? What if the connection is lost and data is lost? Controller module is responsible for bringing the data once the connection is established. Okay, that kind of connection related problems also are handled by control module, and then it gives to the right module, gives the data package to the right module, and the right module, the only function is to transfer the data seamlessly to the HANA database. Okay, and since HANA is a database, the type of connection in HANA is database connection. Okay, the type of connection between the source system and LTR server is RFC, whereas from LTR to HANA is database connection. Okay, so this is how the SLT works in case of SAP source system.